before we begin, I'll give a little bit of a background on the team here. I'm here with my co-founder Eyal Herzog, and we've been building internet companies for about 15 years. We're actually consumer internet folks. So Eyal was the creator of a company called MetaCafe. It was actually one of the first big video sharing sites on the internet, 50 million users. And I got into video games very early, focused on smartphones. One of the first companies called Mytopia in iOS and Android multiplayer content. So when we got into Bitcoin in 2011, we came with a very different mindset. We weren't technologists as much as we were consumer internet folks. And so one of the things that we realized is that there's a very high barrier to entry today to creating new currencies, to using currencies. And so we really focused on addressing those problems at Bancor, and I'll take you through a quick presentation that explains to you what Bancor is, and then we'll very quickly shift over to a live demo so you can actually see it in action. All right, so the first thing that's important to understand is that for something to be accessible for regular people, you need to be able to use it without needing to understand what the blockchain is, needing to be a software developer, the way that you upload a video to YouTube. Anybody can do it. And so here you see an example of our chat bots. On your right, you can see an example of just kind of creating a currency. It just asks you some questions. What's the name of your currency? How many decimal places? Enter a description, a few other key pieces of information. You hit go at the end, and boom, you have a currency on the Ethereum blockchain. Although in the future, this will work on really any smart contract-enabled blockchains, including private blockchains. And the same for starting a crowd sale, an ICO. So you want to initiate an ICO. There's a few more questions that you need to answer. What kind of ICO do you want to do? How long is it going to run? Is it capped? Is it uncapped? At the end of the process, your ICO begins. Now, the first question is, why would you even want to have a currency? Why do we even need so many currencies? And I think that aside from maybe more philosophically understanding that a currency is credit creation, and by democratizing credit creation, we can really change the world. Just to give more practical examples, the killer feature today on blockchain is decentralized financing. So today, a currency is real. I mean, this is the first killer app on blockchain. And we see this starting with Ethereum, which was, other than Mastercoin, maybe the first real crowd sale, and a platform that now is going to set off a wave of crowd sales. We all see what happened with Ethereum. Our friend Brock Pierce, I'll read the quote that he said recently. It's my belief in the next 10 or 20 years, no startup in the world will be financed in any other way other than with a token. People are going to make local currencies, group currencies, project currencies. There's going to be literally millions and millions of different kinds of currencies in the world. However, making it simple to create a currency, that's only half the job. The other problem we face is the liquidity issue. If you create a currency and it can only be used in one place and it can't be traded globally, then you've made something that is relatively useless. It'll have very low utility. Once smart contracts were invented, maybe let's call it the second generation of blockchains, everything changed. Because for the first time in the history of mankind, we have a situation where software code that is trustless and immutable and isn't held by a central party can now hold money. It can hold programmable money. And this is such a massive paradigm shift that it literally changes everything. It's going to change the way our laws work. It's going to change the way our society organizes. It's the ability, if Bitcoin was the revolution that started off decentralized money, smart contracts are the revolution that starts off decentralized legal systems, business law, and how people organize in companies. And you have your articles of incorporation, and it governs, and lawyers and escrow agents, and they are in charge of making sure that contracts are enforced. We don't need all of this anymore in the same way that we needed it in the past. With Bancor, we've introduced a new standard for cryptocurrencies that relies on smart contracts. And what it does is it allows a currency to be created with the ability to hold one or more currencies in its reserve. So you can see here, this currency over here has a reserve of actually a currency called Bancor, the first currency that's going to be created on the Bancor protocol. this explains what happens, right? So if you're a mathematician, this makes complete sense to you. If you're not, like the rest of us, then in a nutshell, what these formulas say is that the way you can sell your currency is you simply send it to the smart contract. It destroys your currency and pulls money out of the reserve for you. When you want to buy your currency, you simply send the reserve currency to the smart contract. It issues you your currency. It solves what is known as the double coincidence of wants in asset exchange. Right? So this fancy term, all it means is that, you know, if you think about barter, barter is very inefficient, right? Because I got to come with my tomatoes and you're going to come with your carrots, and we need to meet in real time. We need to have exact opposite needs. It's very, very low chance, right? So how do we solve this with technology? We invented money, and money separates the buying from the selling, right? I can buy now, I can sell later, and we have this intermediary. If you think of the currencies, it still works like barter, right? There's no money for money, right? You need to have two people with opposite wants that meet on an exchange, and in real time, bids and asks, and then we have a deal, and that's how we set prices between currencies, and that's how we provide liquidity with market makers and speculators. But this entire paradigm of hundreds of years of currency theory can now change because we have smart contracts. So we actually can have one person buy the currency now, one person sell the currency later. These two people do not need to be matched in real time. They just need to work vis-a-vis the smart contract. And so we see Bancor as the world's first solution to the double coincidence of wants in currency exchange. We started this protocol off to really solve this problem, and very quickly we realized that something that is very simple, this concept of a currency that can hold more currencies in reserve, it's actually very profound, because you can build many different kinds of things with it. So imagine that you are holding multiple currencies in reserve. In this case, what you've essentially created is you've created a decentralized ETF. An ETF is basically a basket of currencies, right? Like an index fund. Except today, if you want an ETF, you need a bank or financial intermediary to hold this ETF for you. But you don't need this anymore. Now with smart contracts and with the help of the Bancor protocol, we can create the world's first decentralized ETFs. These ETFs don't only need to be ETFs of different altcoins, right? Let's do an ETF with Golem and Augur and Melonport and have it be like an altcoin ETF focused on data, or a consumer ETF, or a sharing economy ETF with Airbnb and Uber and Lyft inside. But you know, now the real role of banks and large trusted institutions is to start asset tokenization, where we take the real world and we bring it online, right? So we not only bring the fiat world into blockchain, but we start bringing gold and oil and all kinds of real assets. And you can now create decentralized ETFs that represent these assets, and you hold them directly. Nobody holds this for you. Now, I think this is, to me, the most important slide, because coming from user-generated video and content, this is the phenomenon we learned. I mean, this was $1 billion lesson for us, right? Because we were the biggest player in video in the world, and then somebody that you may have heard of called YouTube came and kind of kicked our ass. So you know, after we scratched our head for a couple years and tried to think what happened, we realized that we were focused on the hits. We brought you the best videos in the world, and 50 million people came every month to see the best videos in the world. But YouTube, I don't know if they knew it at the time or if it happened, you know how things go, but YouTube became the ultimate destination for the long tail. And something people don't know is that you take the top 1,000 videos on YouTube, the ones that have 1 billion views, right? You know, the Justin Bieber and the Katy Perry videos and that good stuff, and combine them all together, and you don't even have 0.1% of the views on YouTube. All of the views are in the long tail. All of the traffic is in the long tail. And the long tail is 2 to 3 orders of magnitude bigger than the hits. YouTube, Facebook groups, right? We have a platform. We have super users who are creating the content, and we have end users who are consuming the content, right? Reddit is the reason Reddit beat Dig, which was the leader in the space, right? So the long tail is what happens when you take something that had a high cost of failure and you make it a very low cost of failure, and now everybody can try. And so there is no long tail for cryptocurrencies. And there's no long tail because it's not easy for everybody to do, and because we have a liquidity problem that we couldn't solve until smart contracts and the Bancor protocol. I want to actually have my partner Eyal bring up something that we've never shown before. This is actually our actual unreleased live product. And what you see here is you can actually see communities created with those chatbots. Anybody can make these type of communities. Any farmers market around the world, or whether you're doing an actual project like the next Golem or so. You can see here there's the very simple page where you can go to initiate your crowd sale or create your ETF. You don't have to initiate a crowd sale. There's many different things you can do with it. Yeah, let's actually really quickly go and actually create a currency in real time right now on Ethereum's testnet. All right, so it brings up the bot. You can use Telegram, you can use Facebook. We're integrating now with WeChat. We also have some other integrations that are unannounced, but we will talk about them more shortly. Eyal here is really quickly just going through the questions, answering them. What's the name of your currency? What's the name, in, the plural name of it? What's your location? All right, so it knows we're in Amsterdam. What do you want your symbol to be? This is testnet, right? So we can just play around with it and do whatever we want. All right, now he goes to sign his transaction. Takes about 13 seconds or so to process a block, so it's going to take a few seconds till it's done. But here's our currency already for Bitcoin Wednesdays. If somebody wants to go on to Parity or check it out, you can find it already on the testnet. We'll just maybe add a nice little photo for Bitcoin Wednesdays. Okay, we can't find it right now, but you can see how easy it is. Anybody can then now kind of set their group. You can have discussions in this group. Oh, there it is. That's the ping we just got back from testnet. That just tells us that the token was successfully created. And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's well, we're just making history right here with the first live demo. And I think it's very interesting. You were mentioning the learnings you were taking from myopia, which you would think is completely different, and applying it. I guess that has also allowed you to look at it a little bit differently than, and really more from a community perspective, right? What are the key things that kind of, I guess I'd be very interested in kind of the first eye-opening steps you went through there.
So I think what was different for Guy and myself when we saw Bitcoin for the first time in 2011, this was after we did a lot of research into economics and how money works and how money issued and how banks are working. And we were actually quite amazed to learn how the system works. And when we saw Bitcoin, and given our background in consumer technologies, what we saw is essentially the first user-generated currency that is actually traded across the world, and no one even know who is the user who generated it, but it works. And when we saw that, we started to think about, there's going to be many, many more from, I would say, economic perspective, because when thinking about this, every stock of every company is a currency. Every bond is a currency. Every derivative is a currency. It's just different currencies that have different properties, different behaviors. And at that moment, we thought, what should be the platform, the economic basis that can work with all those currencies and connect them together? And we didn't have a really good answer for that until Ethereum came up. So we were experimenting a lot in the years 2013, 14 with user-generated currencies that we created on a non-blockchain platform that we created just to see how people use community currency. We created the first, I would say, community currency platform that had more than 1,000 transactions a day by people buying products and services from each other using a currency that they created. So we wanted to experience the user side of it. Every revolution that you can think of technologically always comes from the end user. It's the Facebooks, the WhatsApp, the YouTubes that bring on the revolution. It never comes from the top. It always comes from the bottom. So we were searching, and we're still searching for that end user experience that can drive this revolution. Now, whenever you buy the token from the smart contract and you pay, let's say with Ether, let's say the reserve is in Ether, and you pay Ether and you get the token, and whenever you do that, the price actually goes up. And whenever you are doing the opposite, which means that you liquidate your token and you're turning back to Ether, the conversion price goes down. This means that the price is constantly adjusted toward the price point in which there is equilibrium between the volume of the buying and the volume of the selling, which we believe is the right price for the token. And this is actually how it happens in exchanges, but on a synchronous mode, where here there's what we call asynchronous price discovery mechanism, where you can have a token that every day just one person buy or sell it, and it's not a problem because they don't need to be matched with each other, and the price is determined over time.
So the way I understand it is that your contract is a market maker that works in the same way as a market maker in, for example, Gnosis.
I would say that it's a combination between a token, which is its own market maker. So usually when people say market maker, they're talking about a separate contract. They're talking about a separate contract, which is like dealing with tokens. But with Bancor compatible token, the token itself is its own market maker, which is something that can only be done in the age of smart contracts.
Could you explain what the role of Bancor itself is? I mean, the token Bancor, because I don't see the necessity.
Ethereum has its own currency now. Because it has its own Ether currency, it actually create value according to the success of the platform of Ethereum. So when there's a currency like Bancor that we are going to offer as the default reserve currency for any currency created on our platform, the meaning of that is that as more and more currencies are created using Bancor as a reserve, it would increase the demand for the Bancor currency and actually create a network out of all those tokens. So they actually can benefit from the network effect. So if one currency succeeds and the value of the Bancor currency goes up, everyone benefits. In the same way that if one application on Ethereum is doing well and it increases the demand for Ether, everyone that works with Ether benefits from the value increase. So it's actually a way to create a network effect between all the currencies that use Bancor as their reserve token.
There's a lot of new stuff in this concept, and we're very used to it. There's a lot of questions, and the more people have a background in trading, and the more people are kind of like, hardcore finance folks, they tend to have many questions. And so I encourage the people with kind of deep questions to, first of all, go to our website, bancor.network, download our white paper, read it.
So you guys mentioned how smart contracts and, therefore the removal of need for a human middleman means that we have this ability to create trustless, everything, governments, currencies, everything, companies, everything. Therefore, is your code and your algorithm, like Golem's, for example, open sourced?
Yes, you can actually go to the website right now and look at the smart contracts and download them, review them.
And the entire thing will remain open sourced forever.
Yeah. Yes, of course. I think that the beautiful thing about this new asset class and this new way of raising seed funding with a token, I think the most beautiful thing about it is that it's really supportive of the idea of open source, because the common interest of the group is just to get the token to be as popular as possible, like in Bitcoin. It's the common interest of everyone to use Bitcoin and get as many people to use Bitcoin, because people are profiting from the value of Bitcoin that appreciate. They are not profiting from the margins that they're able to make because they have a closed source that put you ads that you don't want to see. Open source means that people can cooperate with each other, and we don't need to see the same a piece of software developed by 20 teams at the same time competing with each other. We have what I call the option to hard fork. If there's a project and you think that it can be done much better, you can fork it and you can take it from there. I think this is much more efficient, and this is how evolution works and got us to here. So how better it can be?
This is one of the reasons we set up Bancor as a nonprofit foundation, because our goal is to create a standard. The real first killer use of kind of these tokens that you see projects like Golem and others issuing is that for the first time it gives a business model to open source services. And this was just not possible in the past. But if you think about it, you know, Facebook and all these things we do on the internet, these are all services. And they're going to have a very, very hard time competing in a world of open source services.
Hi. Your stated goal was to provide more liquidity, as far as I understand it. And you were using, it sounds like a bit of a pig that the price of the token issued would be based on the underlying assets sent to the smart contract?
The value of the token is derived only from its utility. So the reason that Golem token worth anything is because people believe that they will have a utility in the Golem network. So the price of Bancor token is not different. It's not derived by the reserve. The reserve is only a feature. It's a function that is provided to anyone that does a price discovery and provide liquidity in an asynchronous way. But the price is driven by how many people want to buy the token. Well, in comparison to how many want to liquidate it, and if more people are selling it than buying it, then the price will drop, you know, to zero. If more people are buying it than selling it, the price will go up. But this is not the source of value of the token. That's a very important point.
Okay, so if that's the case, wouldn't you end up in a situation where you wouldn't have enough reserves in the smart contract if the price is floating?
The fancy formulas that were here showing up before, I'll tell you a story. It took me like a week in Excel to look for those formula, to find this formula, in order to make sure that what you're saying will never happen.
Okay.
Because the formula is keeping what we call a constant reserve ratio, meaning that if you have a reserve of Ether, and let's say you have 10 Ether in the reserve and the constant reserve ratio is 20%, it means that the price calculated for your currency right now is exactly 50 Ether, because it's 20% of 10 Ether, then the market cap of all your token will be 50 Ether. And whenever someone is buying, it means that the reserve grows up. You have more reserve. Then, therefore, if you calculate the price per unit, you will see that the price goes up per unit. Whenever someone is liquidating, then it means that Ether is coming out of the reserve balance goes down, and then the calculator price is actually lower. We call that concept CRR. You can read about it in our white paper. And the reason that those formula lists seems a little complicated is because what they are making sure that if you buy or sell a lot of currency, it would act as if you are selling infinite parts in infinite small amounts, and the price is recalculated after each sale.
If the liquidity is based on the underlying assets, wouldn't that also act as a limit on the liquidity of the token you're...
There's always a limit on the liquidity. For example, if I want to sell 20% of the supply of Bitcoins right now, even Bitcoin that is very liquid, I cannot sell 20%, and I will drive the price basically to zero if I try to do that. So liquidity is always limited at some capacity, but we believe that what we are offering is offering much less volatility than what's experienced today in the exchange. When you have, for example, 10% CRR, which is not much, it's 10% that you hold in the reserve, it means that you can compare it to an exchange. There is 10% of the supply in the market depth waiting for you to buy or sell. So in terms of the volatility, we expect way smaller volatility than what experienced. It's not perfect liquidity, but today exchanges are not providing perfect liquidity.
10% liquidity for the underlying assets for the token?
What I'm saying is
Right.
that it would be like having a market depth
Okay.
in the size of the 10% of the total supply of the currency. That's a huge market. I've never
Understand.
seen one that big. And the market depth is what defines the level of liquidity that you currently have. Because if there's very shallow depth, there's very little liquidity. If there's deep depth,
I suppose if the reverse, the reserves run out, then the price of the underlying token would then go down.
it can never run out. The way that the formula works is the reserve will always be worth exactly X% of the market cap as defined. And again, you can read.
It's quite complicated. I'll have to look into this more. It's very interesting.
Great. I'll be happy to talk more about it.
Sounds like it's going to be an interesting white paper. Yeah?